Hi, this is Bill Ringle, host of My Quest for the Best, where we meet business thought and community leaders to discuss issues relevant to entrepreneurial growth. Dr. Janice is CEO of the Gabriel Institute. She's a behavioral scientist and architect of the technology that powers team ability. Dr. Presser studied team interaction in academic, clinical, and business settings for over 40 years and has applied her expertise in the areas of HR metrics and measurements, workforce planning, and the future of work. Dr. Presser has authored 7 books. Most recently, Timing Isn't Everything, Teaming Is. Welcome, Janice.
Hi, Bill. Great to be here.
Janice, tell me, who was an early influence in your life?
Well, that's really difficult. You know, the earliest influences, there are parents, and that's our earliest experience of teaming. But if you mean influences as in the people who you could get answers from, my earliest questions didn't have answers. I actually had to spend a lot of time seeking them out myself.
Give me an example of what you mean.
Well, I wanted to understand what was really going on between people when they were doing things together. You know, even as a young behavioral scientist, all of my colleagues were working with the ideas of measuring the things that were happening inside people. You know, personality trait things, there were intelligence scales and all of that. That was good, but what I really wanted to understand was what was going on in the spaces between people. I mean, that was a giant mystery to me. You know, there were very practical experiences that we all have. So whether we're little kids, and sometimes we enjoy playing with those kids, but not so much with those, or we're adults, and we love working in one work group, but another one not so much, or we try business, or we do anything, just about anything, because, you know, everything is about people interacting with other people. And why is it sometimes that you have this amazing feeling that you're yourself, but you're like the best you that you ever are when you're doing it with these people, but not so much with those? And that really was the mystery that I wanted to really understand. Now, I don't just think I did this alone for my whole life, because look, about 1984, I met another behavioral scientist who had actually been thinking about the same thing. And that's my now lifelong friend and dear colleague, Dr. Jack Gerber. We teamed up, and he's been a very strong influence on me since then. And as it's gotten, what we did together has gotten into bigger and bigger circles, now I have more and more influences in my life. And there are all the people who come back and say, I tried that, and it made the difference.
So, Janice, for yourself, you spoke about having an experience which many of us can relate to, I think all of us listening, where you have an experience working in a group of people and things just work great. Not just all right, but great. Things are even better. And you look at that and say, what was it about that group? What was an early experience, or before you figured out and put this into a technology, an experience you had that you look back on and say, not only do I want to create that for myself, but I want to help other people figure out how to get to situations like that where they can have experiences being at their most productive and meaningful groups of people working together.
Meaningful is the absolutely right word. So for me, this was a long time ago. I was a very young mother, and this is back in the time when young mothers did not necessarily go outside to work. And so I got to run several nonprofit groups, just volunteers. And, this was before I knew that, well, you really should get paid for doing these things, but it was a different time. And that was what we did. We were on a mission to change the world. Yes, this was at the time of the women's movement, and this involved what we thought of as making the world safe for mothers and their babies. And what was exciting and gratifying to me was this was the first situation in which people naturally said, well, okay, we're going to do exactly that. And it had just been a dream of mine that I knew I couldn't do by myself. But what was important was that everyone else did all those other things that I didn't do very well. So I was great at coming up with the ideas, but, you have to have people who lead the execution and people who make sure that the details get followed up on, the person who handles every emergency as it happens. Meanwhile, I was thinking out 20 or 30 years, what's the meaning this is going to have into the long-range future? And it was so gratifying, not just because I was doing what really felt like it was my mission in life, but that I also could do it with people who felt that the way in which they were contributing to this thing that was bigger than any of us, that was meaningful to them. And that's a very contagious feeling, that feeling that what you're doing is meaningful and important. And I just wanted to know, there must be some way you can figure this out. Why did it take me this long? Because, of course, I had been through so many experiences where not only did they not let me do it, but, well, to tell you the truth, they suffered a little because of it. In my first job, they wouldn't really let me contribute as much as I wanted to, and so, because it was going to be leadership of some way or another, I helped organize union. It was actually a lot of fun. It was satisfying. I'm not sure that it aligned, though, with what the vision was of the people who were actually signing that paycheck.
So, Janice, one of the things you said was really interesting. I think a lot of people in business who are working in teams today are saying it's so important and it's so recognizable when you have a group of people who are working together and everything clicks. How do we do that so it's not accident, happenstance, just serendipity? And
would you like
that really led you? I'm sorry. And that was a question that really led you to pursuing this as both a passion and a profession and creating a whole new branch of business science.
Exactly. Teaming is a science. Teaming, great teamwork, that team chemistry that we want. There's an operating system for it, and, it took quite a number of years of research with Dr. Gerber, and then we broke the code. And you can use it to actually design your team right from the beginning. So, whether you're a startup or you're a huge multinational, it doesn't matter. We all start new things at different times. New initiatives, maybe open up a new office, just have a new project. And if you understand people in terms of three important things to know about them, the most important being how do they really make meaningful contributions to something bigger than themselves. And then you use 4 simple principles to help them manage themselves and you as a team, because where I come from, leadership is a team sport. Then what you have is everyone serving this team that's bigger than them, this team that becomes like a living, breathing organism. And because you're meeting all of its needs collectively, it can get to its mission. So it produces extraordinary business results when you actually have that. You just don't make people happier, which is good, but you actually see measurable results. Yes.
Janice, let me jump in. You said that there are 3 important points. One of them was, how does each individual really make meaningful contributions to the group? What are the other 3 points that you wanted to make sure people think about when they review the teams that they're currently in operation?
So the second important thing is this person contributing within an environment that is comfortable for them? So let me give you an example. The job that I was really a failure at. One of the primary things was it wasn't exciting enough for me. Change wasn't happening quickly. It wasn't risky. There wasn't a lot of uncertainty and ambiguity. Well, I like that. And so that's why I fit great in a startup. But not everyone is like that. There are people who don't call it excitement. They call it stress. and it's not comfortable for them. So they will fit much, much better in the kind of environment that people like me generally don't do as well in. So it's not that people are good or bad or indifferent, it's that everyone has an optimal place that they're going to make a better contribution from the standpoint of the team, and also do it in a way that's fun for them, which can mean less stressful or exciting enough. And then the third important thing, it's actually a pretty complex thing. See, there are roughly a few tens of thousands of different kind of more minor ways that we just interact with other people. Some of them are very positive in some situations and not so positive in another. And how about if I give you an example to explain that? We call them teaming characteristics, the other two being role and coherence. So with teaming characteristics, I have one, and it probably sounds not very good. I am just not an up-close manager. I'm not. In fact, if the truth be told, I really don't like managing people who need a lot of managing at all. That means that in my current job as CEO of an emerging growth technology company where I have amazing people that, I guess on the org chart, technically they may report to me, but they don't really need management. Of course, I designed the team and we selected them using our own technology, and Teamability is a technology. You do it online, and it is a simulation of how you team, and so it basically elicits your teaming from you. But you then can kind of micro-fit the right people to the right thing. See, I'm great where you don't have to manage people, because if you did try and manage them very closely, they'd call you a busybody, or a micromanager, and they'd hate it. But think about it. My nightmare job would be being supervisor in a call center. Please, no one ever hire me for that. I could get the job because, I could fake it in an interview. But when I actually had to do the work, when you are working in a call center and managing generally more entry-level people, they need that close management. They need somebody who really cares about developing them. And, while I'm an otherwise pretty nice person, I guess some people like me at least, nobody would like me when I did not meet that need of the team, that is to have a manager who's really there for people. So that's it. It's really pretty simple, but you can't just ask people, what are you like? Because people will tell you what they think you want you to hear. Whoa! How do you want to make that meaningful contribution? For you, you might feel like it's your mission in life. 2, coherence. That's the environment. And 3, teaming characteristic. Those things that might modify.
So you mentioned that it's important to be aware of them and to make sure that there's a good fit between those characteristics and a job. And there are, thousands of ideas in human resources about how to bring people onto a team and questions to ask them to make sure that they have the right experience. How does this approach differ from simply asking people whether they'd like this job, whether they are capable of doing this job, and whether they have experience doing this job in the past?
You bring up some really important points. And, if you are hiring someone, let's say to be a driver, please make sure that they have a current license, and, you probably know how to do that verification. There are some things that are critical aside from the teaming. And so you can get that in many different ways. But if you want to understand anything about someone, all of the ways that existed prior to Teamability are some variation of just directly or somewhat indirectly asking someone what they're like. But it's like asking people what they think they're going to do, what they say they're going to do, and then what they actually do are not always the same.
I think that everyone's had the experience of hiring people and thought they were hiring one person, and then the next time they come into work, somebody completely different shows up. And everyone has that happen to them. And it sounds like Teamability is a way to help people reduce the risk of that happening especially when the person who shows up is less likely to be successful in that role.
Exactly. And you know what? It's not good for business to not have the needs met. It's also not great for people to be in a job that isn't going to be satisfying to them in at least some way, and to have that feeling of at least doing something productive. That's very difficult. It's even worse in a tight economy or in a situation where there's a narrowing of possibilities for someone. That is, they may have been an executive and through a merger or no fault of their own, been excess. They find themselves out on the market. They're past whatever age, and yes, I know we're not supposed to have age discrimination, but, it gets considered. People will say you're overqualified or have too much experience. And yet, the interesting thing is from the team's perspective, none of these things matter. In fact, when we were first doing validations on team ability, we looked not only at race and gender being, U.S.-centric, but we also looked at age and nationality because we were blessed with a lovely international group of people. And in fact, from the team's perspective, and if you look at how people really make contributions, those do not bear out. None of these things matter. And so teams really do not have that same insistence on, a certain amount of years of experience. First of all, how do you know if somebody's been doing something more each year or been doing the same thing each year? There's another study that people may find intriguing. This is about hard skills. So you may not be aware of this, but if you ask someone how good they are at something, very often you'll get something extremely incorrect because people do not know what they do not know. So a great example is how you use spreadsheets. Lots of people who've used them a lot, but someone else has set them up, will tell you, oh yes, they're great because at doing it. They're really an expert because they can put the numbers in quickly. Then when they learn about formulas and pivot tables and all that other stuff, all of a sudden they will rate themselves as being less good at that. So what's the truth? Well, all and neither. The fact is, evaluating yourself, you use yourself as the reference point. And when you look in a different way, so if you're trying to objectively measure what somebody knows about spreadsheets, there are objective tests you can use, although be careful because a lot of them have the answers on the web, so you might want to monitor that. But when you are looking at how people team, you need a completely objective or outside look at how that is, and you need a way to actually elicit teaming. That was about the first, almost 20 years of Jack's and my research before we figured out how to do that.
So, Janice, that's really interesting. What you're saying that is a lot of jobs that are very skill-based, where you need someone to unload boxes from a delivery truck, or you need someone to be a driver and drive a truck from point A to point B. These are things that can be evaluated and scoped out clearly based upon their experience and qualifications and maybe a sample period of time working in the company. However, for situations where there's more perhaps complexity to it, or where there's more judgment required as to whether someone has several qualified candidates on paper, but who looks like they're going to be the right person to step into the role, and whether it's a maintenance position where they want to maintain a company or a division that's growing, or they want to be aggressive and grow it, those things are much harder to tease out in a one-on-one interview than they are with using some sort of instrument like team ability. Is that the point that you're getting at, is that when it's close,
right,
where you really need to rely on it?
Think about what's important, what is truly important in this job. If it's something like lifting boxes, then ask somebody to lift the weight of a typical package or the heaviest package that has to go on. That's a pretty good test. But if the test is, will they smile at the person they're delivering it to? Do they have to deal with any regulators while they're on the road or things like that? Ask yourself, to be successful at this job, how does this person need to interact with other people, whether that is managing other people, selling to other people, and, in which case that, sales is not always the same. Selling a cell phone from a push cart in the mall is not the same as, selling a nuclear installation. So how many people do you have to interact with, and in what way? So who really is your customer? If you have a customer who prefers, typically lots of warmth and chatting and things like that, particularly if you're selling in the personal type of space, clothing or high-end cosmetics or things like that, you want people who have that teaming characteristic that they actually like to chat with people. But if you're selling something, technical, and maybe the people you interact with are engineers, for the most part, people who do jobs like that aren't going to go on and on and on about things that you may consider of less importance. So more business-like conversation is very different than interacting with someone on a more chatty kind of level. Rethinking what we expect of people in terms of interpersonal interactions or longer-term relationship is really key because, why do people leave jobs? They didn't like the boss or they don't like the people they're working with. Most people don't leave because, they don't like the actual task that they do. They probably pick that job because that's the task that they like to do.
So what are some of can you give me an example of one of the companies that has embraced team ability, and what are they using it for in their company?
Optimally, our clients are using it for everything from the very beginning, that is designing how are we going to get this, whatever it is, done, how are we going to reach this particular mission for this team, to selecting the people to come into that team, to helping the manager manage everybody better. And that's those 4 little management bits that I told you about before. That's part of the operating system of teamwork. Here's one of my absolutely favorites. This is a company that's about somewhere between 1 and 2 billion, I think, in business, and with a very team-focused CEO who was ripping his hair out because he had 30% very expensive new hire turnover. Turnover is calculated on how many people each year did you have to replace. Well, 30% of just the new people you bring in, you would probably call that a 30% failure rate. And these were expensive people. Well, the CEO heard about team ability, tried it. The turnover went to 0. It stayed at 0 about 2.5 years, at which point, which was actually 5 years ago, just about 5 years ago now, the CEO won an award, a Supernova Award, at an annual innovation conference for the use of an emerging technology to produce business benefits. You think about the money you save, but also the aggravation that you save, because it's really distressing to have to let people go or to have them come to you and say, this is not the job that I thought it was. And we take that stuff personally.
You mentioned earlier that there are tips that help people manage better. Everyone listening is having to deal with people on their team and people who they oversee, who they'd like to have some practical ways to help them do things better in managing and overseeing projects and people. What are a few tips that you have based upon the insights you've gained studying this field?
Actually, there are 4, and they are the basis for the Team Ability Playbook that we construct for managers of teams that are based on not only how do the people on the team actually contribute, but also they are written from the standpoint of the leader. Because you know what, you and I could be managing exactly the same people, and because the chances are probably slim that we manage people exactly the same, our playbooks would be completely different. So here's the big four. 1, role fit. Please, people do best what they like best. People like best what they do best. You're not going to change that. So give people actual work, tasks, day-to-day things to do that align with the way in which they contribute. They will be happier and so will you. But more, the fit on the team fit. Make sure that team, that living, breathing team that you have, has every person on it meeting one of those key needs that that team has. Now, that is not a static thing. It's going to vary. So if we're talking about a strategy team, it's going to look very different than the roles that would go on, let's say, a customer care team, where you can instinctively, I think, understand that the way that strategy teams work is we're looking at the far future and we do lots of analysis and things like that, whereas your customer service team needs to be people who love to help people with immediate problems and see that they're solved well. So that's the second important thing. Third big thing, and this is where team chemistry is born. For each of us, we have our role, our way that we contribute. And if we try to do everything, we don't succeed very well, and we feel like we're being just stretched in too many directions. When we find our role partner, and for every role there's an optimal partner, then one person starts and the other person finishes in most cases. It's like that, kind of a front-end, back-end thing. So, for instance, for me, I have lots of words, and I write lots of words too, but when I work and hand off what I've done to my role partner, who then shapes it and forms it and makes it actionable, then, while he's working on that, I'm off on my next project. So we're both always doing things that we really enjoy, and over time, all of that magic, that trust, that culture that we want to embed in our organizations starts to develop, and it's all around collaboration, and it's truly exciting and incredibly efficient. So it has a bottom line component. That's the third one. The fourth one is what we call role respect. So this requires a little explanation. So role is the way that you make that contribution, and role respect is the way that a manager can manage, communicate, respect, appreciate any other person on the team in a way that aligns with the way in which they make their contributions, because that gets the message in like as deep as it can go. It gets right to that soul of that person, and they are much more likely to therefore act on it in the way that you need them to act on it. It's really quite amazing when we get respect or appreciation in a way that does not align with our role. If we're very conscious of it, we'll often think, gee, that's nice. They're like trying to be nice and express appreciation, but it doesn't get to the core of who we are.
So Janice, I've seen this quite a lot. I've been in meetings, and I remember one quite clearly, where there was a group of people who had worked on a presentation, and let's say that there were 5 people on a team, and one person was very much involved in developing the strategy and the architecture of the presentation, and another person was excited about the graphics and the consistency of the font and the look and feel of it. And when one of the executives who was part of the audience and who they hoped to influence to buy into the initiative said, wow, I really thought you guys did a great job, everyone looked up and was excited, and then the next words out of his mouth were, where did you get those graphics? The strategy guy just almost fell over in his chair and thought he didn't get it. But the person who was into the graphics thought, oh my gosh, all of that effort paid off. The team worked to produce this, but if you don't appreciate people for the unique contributions that they're making, that falls short of motivating to continue doing their best work. Is that, in essence, what the role respect is about?
In essence, I'll give you, though, what I would have wanted to hear. I would have said, my God, this looks like this was planned for success. These pictures really tell the story. Because that's really what people were trying to do. Think about it. What was the meaning behind what they did? You know, the grabbing on to something, you know, almost minor about a presentation. Presentations aren't just the pretty pictures. Somebody planned that out in advance, and by not recognizing that at all, you've essentially just said, well, what you did just didn't count, and probably someone just, I don't know, maybe went online and found some pretty pictures and threw them in, and that's it. Yeah.
So, Jen, what would you say if you were an executive who wanted to recognize the strategic part of it, as well as the graphical part of it, as well as the other, and maybe you knew those two people well, so you had an understanding of the contributions they made, and you knew that there were other parts of the team that also wanted to be recognized. How would you respond to a short pitch so that others can listen to how you respond and learn to make it more inclusive as well as more precise in recognizing those different contributions?
Well, I might have started at the beginning and said, wow, there must be a great vision that drove this. It's clear that somebody strategized how to make this actually happen. And there was probably somebody who really shaped those ideas up so they could actually happen. And you must have pulled in some amazingly organized person, because any project needs to have somebody driving it and somebody cleaning it up and managing it. And what's amazing is that there are elements in here that I've never seen before. Somebody must have found them from somewhere. And somebody clearly managed these things. And it might be the same person, you know, people can do more than one. So they didn't have to be all these many people. But I would also recognize that there probably were some last-minute fixes that went into this because, you know, somebody clearly went over this because I didn't see one typo. And, you know, most presentations have one. Unless you have that special person around, by the way, rarely recognized, for making sure that doesn't happen. And someone must have provided some expertise, and bringing it home, it told the story in a way that made it clear that this is not the work of just one person or, you know, or even two, as smart as they all are, that together, collaboratively, this shows the magic of people coming together to do something much bigger than anybody could do alone.
So you're actually recognizing an invisible framework as you share your appreciation in this example, aren't you?
It's an invisible framework to some people, but when you start to point it out to people, it starts to become visible. If you want to have better teaming, make it real, make it visible. Acknowledge people for the parts that they contribute. That's what's important. Oh, and by the way, when you start to do this at work, you will inevitably start to do this in your personal life. And do you know what kind of effects that will have in your personal life? Family, friends.
Positive.
It's thinking very positive. You know, that's where we learn about teaming. When we're very young, we learn it at home. Think about it. What did you learn? And sometimes if we have some old, you know, negative ideas about it, we may be reluctant to be open to it. So, you know, being on a work team, the manager, the owner of the company, the boss, you are giving people a whole other chance to do it even better. And isn't that a cool thing? If you want to leave a legacy of great teaming. Leave a legacy where people understand that they actually can make meaningful contributions. Because when you make the workplace a better place to work, you make the world a better place to live. You have people who think in terms of how can I contribute to this big thing, society, our city, our family, our town. our industry, anything.
Janice, you've written timing isn't everything, teaming is. What led you to write this book?
Well, as I said, I have a lot of words and a lot of ideas, probably like 90% of your listeners, because people who are in management tend to be like that. And so I write them frequently. And because I am blessed with someone who will then take them and shape them into things like books, which are not just about all the words that you come out with, I was able to have a lot of ideas that I've had over the past several years, but I was able to bring them together around the central ideas in this book, which is 30-something chapters, all of which are short and readable in the time that we now have. And if you're wondering about the title, that actually was the title of my TEDx talk. And, sometimes it's very efficient to just reuse some words that have worked for something,
So, Janice, who are some public figures who team well? They make decisions and have an awareness, either explicitly because they've been through a training or because they have an innate gift or some experience with valuing the importance of making sure people are in the right roles who have the ability to contribute to those teams effectively. When you think of people who team well, who are some people who come to mind that might be in the news or running companies or leaders in some respect that people might recognize?
I think anyone who's running, just to answer that, I don't know if I have not been inside your team. And if I have been inside your team, I've probably signed an NDA, and so I can't name you by name, so I will not name you by name, because I have been on some amazing teams and seen how they work from the inside. But if you are running a successful company or division or team or anything, if it's successful, you are very likely doing something right. Wouldn't you like to know what it is so that you don't have to go through the aggravation of saying, oh my God, this worked so perfectly last time and now it doesn't? If you have been able to do it, then you probably will be incredibly good at applying the information that you would get in a team analysis and a team ability playbook without even needing a coach. You probably are great at it. I know we have some great sports teams out there, but we also have some that I understand are having some conversations with some of our people in an attempt to look at that other unseen piece, which is what's going on between people, and being able to make it truly visible. So, it is no less important to run your company that's got, 8 employees, as well as you run a huge multinational, because it is the people that you are near and that you're affecting who then are either going to go home having had an unsatisfying time, or more hopefully go home having a very satisfying time on your team, and then apply all of that, just not by thinking about it, but just by living it in their interactions with the rest of the world.
So recently, on the Eagles team, the Philadelphia Eagles, Jeff Lurie had a big public firing of Chip Kelly, who was the head coach. And Jeffrey Lurie was saying the next person who comes in has to offer more emotional intelligence. And that's a complex, abstract phrase for he didn't get along well with people who he needed to get along well with in order to do the job he was hired to do. Is that the kind of situation that team ability would bring some insights into to make better?
Well, very many insights, because when you think of any sports team, we tend to think of the players that are on the field, but for every player that's on the field, how many people are there supporting them? All of the huge coaching staff, all of the people, the physical therapists and the exercise coaches and the health people, And then there's all of the front office and all the business people. That all supports the people on the team. If they are not teaming well, then that is going to affect the players on the field. You see that. In emotional intelligence, I'd like to think of, teaming intelligence, and I don't even know if intelligence is not really the word. It's think instead of just, kind of the transactional team-to-team thing, but the transformational aspect when every person feels like they're contributing to the big thing, the big idea. And, well, being here in Philadelphia, where we bleed green, Eagles are a big thing. So, well, folks, you can give us a call. We'd be happy to help.
Janice, thank you so much for being on My Quest for the Best, where you've helped us understand that teaming isn't something that's abstract, but it is actually an operating system with organizing principles and practical applications. You've helped us understand different ways to think about the different stages of teaming, from selecting your team to designing what are the needs of the team, and then how to make sure that people stay actively engaged so that they're making their best contributions. I want to appreciate how you've given us the big picture and also broken it down into specific, concrete steps, going through role fit, team fit, role partner, and then also role respect, which is so important for people feeling appreciated on a team. Thank you so much for joining me, Janice.
And thank you for teaming with me.